Hi and welcome. Today we're going to be having Victoria go over the organized brand, which is the vision, mission, values, and attributes of a brand, which will allow you to actually kind of make decisions quicker, hire people, and less it won't be as costly because you don't have to explain your brand all the time. And a little bit about Victoria, she was actually involved in the MasterCard, the campaign, the priceless one. And she was also involved in the New York Jets, and she has tons of experience working with big brands. And now she's putting that into small brands and helping them actually work with their brand, have the value so they can scale their business. All right, Victoria, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm so excited to present all this work. And I'm going to try and front load my piece of it and go quickly so we can talk through things, because this is a lot of fun to talk about because you get into the qualitative things of a brand. So I'm going to jump into the different areas and what the organized brand is just quickly. So let me just advance the slide. It worked a second ago, sorry. It just switched. Okay, here we go. It's my pointer. So we'll get into it. As Tanya mentioned, I've worked at big agencies, MasterCard, the New York Jets, Univision, and a healthcare technology company. And after all of my time working on these brands, I put all that wisdom together to create the organized brand, which is a 4-part system to put together your brand strategy for your business and the playbook on how to move forward. And it's a tool that should be thought of as agile in the sense that you should be checking in on it periodically, quarterly, monthly, just like you would check in on your accounting or any other aspect of your business operations, because the marketplace changes and your business changes, you change, things change, and it's important to go through it. So it's a good system to check periodically. And so this module is one module of the 4 that we're going to go through. So a lot of times you'll read different articles or hear people say, oh, I got my logo, I'm all set. And, you know, my brand, I know what I do. And, you know, my marketing is all good, but there is a difference. And branding is the foundation of your business. As I like to simply say, you have to know who you are before you can talk about what you're offering and what you're doing, so to speak. And it's like self-awareness of your business, if you will, the whole branding equation. And you want to think about it in terms of how do you want to live in the hearts and minds of your customers, of your prospects? Do you want to be generic and be, you know, oh, they're just a cookie, or they're just makeup or something, a category? Do you want to have someone else when you hire people to do work for you from a creative standpoint? I've seen this happen so many times, leaving it up to their vision with a little bit of your input. You need to have that consistency, which is what your brand strategy helps to set for other people to help you execute it. And you also don't want to be defined by your last post or if you had a crisis, you know, in your company, hopefully not. But in the case of Uber, you don't want to be remembered as this dysfunctional, you know, leadership team where people are being transported every day still. So you want to build the value and the equity in how people think about you. So one quick thing I want to ask of you guys on the call is to write down 1 or 2 brands that you love. And it sounds like, okay, easy, but I mean that you love, that you would recommend, that you would refer. It could be a product, a service, a car, anything that you love, you have such strong feelings for, you can't live without it. So I'll just give you a second or 2 to write that down, and we'll get back to that later. And if you want, you know, why you love them, I'm sure it'll come off the top of your head when we get to it. So moving on, just in terms of, you know, it's not just my word and the collective wisdom of the companies I've worked for. These are leaders of industry, thought leaders that are, you know, have helped to shape branding and marketing. You know, in the words of Steve Jobs, marketing is about values. It's complicated. You know, you want to make it clear. It's your responsibility to be clear on how you want people to know you. If people share the values with your company, they will stay loyal to you. So you're increasing loyalty or cementing in that loyalty, and you need that for consistency. And Seth Godin, I love his approach of, how much extra people will pay. Think of how many people go to Starbucks versus the coffee cart, or, McDonald's for a cup of coffee, or maybe you prefer one over the other, but there's a reason that you may pay more for a commodity product. And those are the values that shape it. So we'll get into each piece. So the first part, I'm just going to lay it out there, the difference between vision, mission, values, and attributes. And I'll get a little bit into how you figure these things out. Because this is something else where business owners say, I know what I'm doing. I sell this, or I'm a doctor, or I do that. I don't need to know all this stuff. But it's a very competitive marketplace. You want to make sure you stand out and that people understand why you're special. Why should people choose you over someone else as they go through the process? So your vision is what you strive to achieve every day. It's basically why you do what you do. It's this big picture, and I'll get into a little more semantics on vision, but it's the much bigger picture. In shorthand, sometimes I like to say, how are you making the world a better place? And it's future looking. And your mission is, how are you making your vision come to life? Your mission should be measurable. So if you want to think about, we'll use Tanya as an example here, for Owners Up, she wants to help business owners. Like, it's your, vision to help business owners. You may have a bigger vision than that, or to help people. And then your mission is you're helping business owners. Or your mission could be quantified. This year, I'm helping 100 business owners reach $100 million, or, 100% increase in sales, whatever it might be. That is something that people can rally around, people can stand up to, and feel that. So that's something when you're setting the culture for your organization, these are really important to articulate. We'll go through each one again in more detail, and I have a lot of examples to share so you can start thinking through it. The values, what you stand for. So this is really the soul and the DNA of your business, the culture that is threaded throughout. All of these work off of each other. But if you're thinking about hiring somebody, partnering, I see this a lot. Some people are like, oh, this company, they want to partner with me. They've got a great sales team and they really like my product. And I think we can, make a lot more revenue. And this conversation specifically, I remember with a client, I said, okay, who are they targeting and what are they doing? Like, what are their values and does it match with yours? You're very wholesome, you're very everyday, wholesome, attainable, where they feel more out of touch, out of reach. And I get that they have a great salesperson, but it's going to hurt your brand if you, do something really big with them. And sometimes you can't reverse that, or it's hard to get back to who you are. Unless, of course, you want to go that way and you're borrowing equity from that other brand. But it's a lot of criteria that you can help make decisions with. And your attributes are basically, how your brand looks, sounds, those physical attributes in your communications and those visual qualities. So a lot of these things are internal statements, and they have to be brought out across all platforms, from your advertising to your messaging to your employee handbook to how you train your team, even if you have a VA or a creative team helping you. They need to understand what your values are and how that should be expressed. So in more detail, I wanted to just expand on these two. Your vision, it outlines the worldview of the organization, why it exists, not just for the employees, but for the customers and your vendors, your partners. And it's pie in the sky and it's future looking. That's one thing to keep in mind. And then just going down to mission, it's more goal-oriented. It guides the day-to-day operations and decision-making of organizations. It helps with planning. Again, as I mentioned before, rallying the troops around a common goal or cause. If it's just like, we want to help people, of course, everybody's going to rally around that. But if you can say, we want to help 10,000 people and put glasses on, children in these, third world countries, people can, it's a little more tangible, and people can really put teeth into that and get into that and feel the impact. So that's the important part of mission, is I always like to say it's measurable. It's built in the present, building to the future. So I pulled together, and this is just a springboard for conversation, a few examples of companies' vision and mission statements to give it more context. These are not made up by me. These are what they have on their websites currently. There's a lot of people who interpret what companies are doing, but I found these on their websites. And I have examples later on to show how this is all executed against on their websites and some of their creative. So for IKEA, I mean, these are brands I feel like we all could relate to. Their vision is create a better everyday life from the many people. They are just about everyone, everywhere, and making it accessible. And their mission is offer a wide range of well-designed functional home furnishing products at prices so low that many people as possible will be able to afford them. So you see the difference there between those two statements of they're there to create a better everyday life. A lot of people can say they're creating a better everyday life, right? But here it's how are they doing it? Wide range of home furnishing products. So that's the difference. Same with Netflix. They want to entertain everybody. How are they going to do that? Any screen, anytime, anywhere, provide better entertainment at a lower cost and greater scale than the world has ever seen. And I think they're doing, I mean, I have Netflix. I know most everybody I know seems to have it. I think they're doing a great job of revolutionizing how entertainment and content is delivered on your home screen. And then here is a brand that is a personal favorite of mine, which is Beauty Counter. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. They're a multi-level marketing company. And the whole green and, natural and organic beauty movement in not just beauty, but in food everywhere. The greening up of everything is so pervasive. And their idea is to put the truth back in beauty. And they are really on a mission to make that happen. And here it's, to get safer products in the hands of everyone within their space. And they're doing this by going down to DC, having a sales force of people from their homes, from wherever, selling it locally, as opposed to department store. That was a conscious decision on the owner's part to do that, to have this personal one-on-one experience. So that's a value of their company. So we'll get into it. Some more examples. Let's see. I don't know why it wants to change when it wants to change. Okay, sorry about that. Here, a car company. For Toyota, I've had Toyotas since I could drive and own a car. I don't know why I went to them first. So I guess it was my father's influence, but I don't even know. And he only had American cars. Anyway, Toyota's vision, despite being a Japanese company, is to be the most successful and respected car company in America. So it's as if they've taken their vision and localized it around the globe, but also obviously we're an important market for them. And here their mission is to attract and attain customers, high value products and services, and the most satisfied ownership experience in America. Again, they can measure this. So look at the measurability of some of these statements. They can do their surveys. They can talk to people. It's quantifiable to see, are their owners more satisfied? How many years are they keeping their cars? How many years are their cars on the road? Those are metrics towards satisfaction and quality. Facebook. While I was researching them, I found some of the stuff, which we all know Facebook, and they're a fascinating company. But originally Mark Zuckerberg just came out and did this, and just wanted to connect people in a school. Then it became the world. And it was this notion of just making the world more open and connected. And last year, I didn't realize this, or I didn't connect it as well, but earlier this year, I think it was late spring, early summer, they adjusted or really put teeth into a mission, which was to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together, which sounds like a lot of marketing speak. But the real detail behind this is they are pushing their Facebook groups, and they realized after the election that they could be a platform to empower these conversations that weren't able to happen elsewhere. And you could get like-minded people talking about these things that maybe you couldn't talk about. And in his speech, he gives very specific examples of, women in countries who have been abused and they didn't know who to go to or how to figure this out. They have their own secret community on Facebook. So for him, that's, giving them the power to bring them closer together to solve their problems. So they're really pushing groups and the community aspect of what that platform does versus just everybody connecting and liking pictures and the basics of Facebook. They're giving it a little more. And there's a responsibility that comes along with that. So I found that interesting. But another example is how they adapted. They didn't just say, oh, we're still connecting people. People are just organically doing groups and we're, updating the features because our tech guys keep improving things. It was a conscious decision given the tone of what's going on in the world and world affairs and things like that they adjusted along the way. And I think that's something to keep in mind. It's not just like one and done, we figured this out, we opened up shop and we're good to go. Periodically, you got to check in on what's happening and the impacts of the marketplace. Starbucks, which I mentioned earlier, their vision to share great coffee with our friends and help make the world a little better. It's a nice vision statement. I think it could be updated personally, but that's what they have on their site. And I think they live up to this. And then their mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. And again, this speaks to the idea they love to have this curated feel to their products, whether you think it is or not, whether you buy into that. But, their sandwiches, they want to make it feel like it's not assembly line food, and that, when you watch your drink being, shook up by the barista and they know your name, it's this personalization as opposed to just running in, grabbing and going. There's time and place for all of that. But again, as a consumer, it just depends what you connect to. As a business, you have to make sure you can live up to these promises of what you're delivering and what you're seeking to do with your vision and mission. Any questions at this point? I'm going to get into values and attributes, but any questions? Okay. Okay, so, sorry. The values and attributes. So these are words, essentially. I'll give you an example that are found in what you want to do with your business and how you see fulfilling your vision and mission. These are also found through a lot of consumer research. If you're an established organization, a lot of these words that you may not be thinking of are going to come through customer research, whether it's surveys, on the phone interviews, qualitative, quantitative, things like that. A lot of these come from that equity in what you've built. And it's a good practice to survey your customers periodically, whether it's once a year, once a quarter, but get in there periodically, feedback on things. At certain milestones, I was watching Juliana's piece on onboarding, and just having that survey at key milestones. Is everybody good? Did you get what you want? How do you feel about things? How are you feeling about your business? Really helps to make sure that you're delivering on your values. So they help nurture the positive company culture. They're celebrated internally. They're the guidelines that you can look to in all situations. There are operating principles, how you're going to set your culture, internal conduct, relationships. There was a company I worked for, we wanted to hire somebody, and very high performing individual. He had incredible credentials. He was great. Culturally, he was not a fit. He would have been a lightning bolt into the existing organization, much less, regardless of his performance, it would not have been good because he would have come in as a senior person. He wasn't somebody that we could mold. And my CEO was like, we need to hire him. He's going to take the numbers to another level. And I said, well, what's more important right now? This is what we stand for. This is our culture. Okay, we need a performer, but it's at the risk of potentially losing our team and these other people. Are we living up to our values, or are we shifting? And we ended up not hiring the candidate because we realized the cultural fit was so important of how the organization was, how people interacted, and we knew him too well. It just wasn't going to work. So that's a way that your values can help you make a decision. A silly example is my team. We loved food, and we would always get together and bring different things from our backgrounds. And as we were looking to hire people, we'd say, okay, is this somebody we'd want to go out with? Is this somebody we'd want to have a beer with, go for a mani-pedi with, hang out with our children and their children? Like, how do we feel about them? And do they match up with how we feel as a team and our values as a team? And that really, in addition to skills and all the required things when you're hiring people, it really helped us narrow down some candidates who may have looked wonderful on paper or we weren't sure about. And then obviously we had the rest of our criteria, but it helped us along the way to know our values. The attributes. So this is a fingerprint, a quality, a stamp or trait. As I mentioned before, this is how your values are expressed. So these are more external facing words, if you will, or how everything is going to look. So if you're IBM versus Google, they're both technology companies. Just imagine in your mind, you already have different imagery, right? So IBM is this, it's big blue. They're very corporate, obviously, big technology company. And then look at Google, they feel very different just in your mind what those two names evoke because of how they've expressed themselves over the years and the equity that's been built up in who they are as a business. So I wanted to give examples of a company that I worked on and this is where I'm interested to hear what you guys wrote down as companies that you love in just a minute. But we went out, this was a healthcare technology company, and they had never done any customer research. And they were like, we're doing great. Our sales are growing at 20% and we've got retention. There's hardly any attrition. Everybody needs our technology. We're good. And I said, that's great. Why are we good? Like, what's going on that we can own that no one can steal? Because it's a category that was increasingly competitive and we needed to make sure that we didn't lose our shirt as the category grew. So I said, let's just talk to our customers. I get that we have great sales, but I want to hear from them why. I want a little more texture to it. And these words were pretty much the words that came up through our survey of, we were innovative. Innovative came up so many times. Also, just to add to that, we we surveyed employees as well to make sure that perception and reality were the same. Do our employees understand why customers love us? Are they living up to the same things and versus our customers? So to compare and then also pull it all together as a company. So innovation was there. We were forward thinking, creative, because all these words can mean a multitude of things. You could go adjective crazy. And again, it's how you express these qualities and these values. Service, they felt we were very helpful. Quality was there. Integrity, we were honest, trustworthy. I mean, these are great things to hear from customers. So we were doing really well. But the one thing that came through on the surveys, which I wouldn't put in here as a standalone attribute, was the word love. And I've worked on so many brands and so many kinds of products. I've never seen the word love come up in a survey in open-ended responses as much as I did for a technology company, which is so dry and kind of boring. I love them. I love the team. I love this product. It makes my life easier. They're awesome. I always get help. I love you. Just love. And I was like taken aback. And then I thought about, well, what do I love? Besides like I love ice cream or I love a category. So I'm curious to hear what you guys wrote down that you love from a brand standpoint, if there was anything, or was it hard for you to think about a brand? Anyone?
I came in here a little bit late. What Can you repeat what your question was originally?
Oh, sure. Originally, before I got started in the presentation, I asked everybody to write down a brand that you love, that you would recommend. Could be anything, a product, a service, doesn't have to be business related, could be personal, anything.
There's a brand called Arc'teryx. They make outdoor clothing. And as someone who's been like a rock climbing, backpacking for probably 30 years, it keeps coming up as being the top notch. There's nothing that they produce that's substandard. They didn't go the way that North Face did, in which they had top tier, secondary tier, and then like really cheap stuff so that people could buy North Face because it looks like North Face, but it's actually not high quality. The only thing that they produce is superb quality. So for me, as I'm starting to realize that it's actually cheaper to buy more expensive stuff because it lasts longer, I don't have to think about that brand. I know that they're not going to go cheap on me. They haven't been bought by some company that's like going to cheapen the product and keep the name. It's
whoa. They were bought by Solomon, and that has been a little bit of a negative for me, but please continue.
Really?
And I'll tell you, yes. And I'll tell you.
Well, I didn't know that. So I guess that negates my whole thing.
I forget that my face
No, it doesn't. It doesn't negate it at all because it's one of my favorite companies too. I have a vest hanging up right over there. They're an excellent company, lifetime guarantee. I had a backpack I bought 10 years ago. It's been replaced twice so far. It cost about $150 when I bought it, but I'm on my third one and I haven't paid for the last two.
Right.
But I have noticed a few things. They are still very expensive brand. I don't know that the quality has slipped, but I don't think they're quite as innovative, and other companies now have started to step up and be as innovative as them, like EMS's brand. So they've come down a notch for me. And similarly with Apple, who I absolutely loved, but because of, the way the business has been handled in the last 4 or 5 years, they've come down a notch for me. So they don't quite have the same standard.
Yeah.
So it's not just, it's keeping that same standard. A lot of these companies, they start off great.
Right.
But then what happens is as they get absorbed by another company, they try to hang on to what made that company great. And some of the corporate culture translates over, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes some of the best employees leave and go to another company. So now Google has a lot of Apple employees, and there are things about Google that I like better than Apple in some ways. So anyway, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. There's also, I seem to see like a lot of companies, they tend to get to the top of their game, and it's like they ride on the wave of their success with their reputation. However, they're not maintaining the same amount of quality that got them there. And so like you said with Apple was huge with photography and videographers because their stuff was so solid. Now, being in Atlanta, I'm surrounded by videographers and directors of photography who are working on film sets, and every single one I've talked to has jumped off Apple like rats off a singing ship because their quality is like for their high-end gear, it has not advanced to the point of cameras. Like the cameras are so far advanced that the computers can't even render the stuff anymore. So they're about 4 years behind the technology of some of the other companies. So everyone I've spoken to has all jumped off Apple and are now getting into custom PCs.
This was awesome, by the way, and this is like a great discussion, but I just want to move on a little bit, and then we're going to get back to why this happens. And some companies care and some don't care, quite frankly, or they have to shift gears. They're shifting where they are. And again, what their values were one day and their priorities that laddered up to their mission and vision have shifted. They started out as one way. Again, they may not want to be, defined as the way they started out. Right. And that's okay. That's part of business. It's not fun on the consumer side of things, but that is why people check in and things have to shift and how much a company wants to risk it. Right. Like if we hired that guy that I mentioned, it could have destroyed our sales team. However, maybe we didn't care. Maybe that was going to be the way we were going to change things around and get things done. So it just depends on the changing landscape and how true you want to stay to these things or shift them depending on, again, how things ladder up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in an instance when you have like a leader, like a Steve Jobs, a visionary, who is no longer able to be with the company, and, some of that corporate culture hangs on, but, there are clearly changes. At some point, do you change a little bit about what people should expect from your product because you're not being able to deliver what you used to be able to deliver? Or do you kind of like try to get back to what it used to be?
It depends. I mean, a lame answer, but it depends, right? The company is shifting. It's technology. They have a responsibility to shift. They didn't get in business to stay the same as they were on day one, right? With the Mac SE Square on your desktop, right? So you could argue they're a great company before they invented the iPhone. When things shifted with other leadership, and then they had to go back to that original core to find themselves, just like Starbucks did, right? When Howard Schultz left, and then it kind of got out of control a little bit in the eyes of what they wanted to do and their shareholders wanted to do. That's the other component. And they had to kind of go back to, okay, what did we start out to do? Is this still right? Some of it might be right. Some of it may not be okay for the marketplace today. Everybody's catching up. Everybody's doing this other kind of curated thing, and we need to do curated our way, or whatever it might be in those conversations. But that's why you have to check in. And this isn't something like you do your taxes and it's done for a year. This is like continuous evolution to keep your brand fresh. Doesn't mean you're changing these things every month or every quarter. It's just you owe the company the responsibility to keep your products fresh, your messaging innovative, and on top of what's going on out there. So you're relevant. You do not want to become irrelevant. Once you become irrelevant, you got to do a lot harder work to backtrack. So to get into the creative on the attributes is how you express. So we were innovative, we were service oriented, we had high quality, we were flexible, we were committed, right? But then that's wonderful, but how do you express all these things? So, how is it that our service is? Well, we're friendly, we're helpful, professional, knowledgeable. And these are the things we made sure of how people were trained. We needed to make sure everybody from the front desk to accounting to whoever knew what the products and services were. If you got a phone, you had to imagine if you got a phone call from anybody at any time, you don't want to, it was important to us to not be like, hold on, let me see. And if somebody got bounced around more than once, if ever, like that was bad from a customer service standpoint. Even when I worked at the New York Jets and we opened the new stadium and we had a ton of new season ticket holders, we changed the pricing structure. It sucked, quite frankly, pardon my French, for new season ticket holders because the price went way out of whack, and we're not going to get into that. But we were like, we have to deliver service. We have to be white glove. We have to be present. We never had that before. Before we changed the building, you just showed up and went, and that was okay. But now you had somebody helping you out, showing you your seat, showing you around the building, and having a much different and higher value experience. And everybody had to know the building. Everybody had to be helpful. If a customer dropped something, no matter who you were, you helped them pick it up. It wasn't like, oh, let me get the janitor. It was like, I'm going to help you right now, and I'm going to call for help. That was the standard that we set at the time. So that's, again, when you're establishing your culture. And then the takeaway from that is what your customers, what they believe, what's in their hearts and minds, as we talked about earlier on, is, they're so friendly, they're so helpful, this makes me love them. And that's how we would get into people expressing their satisfaction with us. In our communications, we made sure that we were hitting on all these cylinders. What kind of tone are we writing in? Are we writing in a first person? Are we writing conversational? Are we writing very corporate? And, what should the tone of our CEO be? How should he come off? Is he talking future, or is he saying, thanks for all the years of service? How we thought a lot about how all these elements were expressed so that we were living up to and building the brand and the equity, how we wanted it to be and how we were shaping it. So this is like the end of the formal part of my presentation. So if there's any questions or comments, I have some examples to just compare from the vision and mission of the brands I chose, just to see how some of this is expressed in creative. I think a lot of it can be intuitive, but I wanted to talk about it. We still have about 10 more minutes, Tanya. Is that right?
Yes. So One question is, when you're
Yeah.
thinking about all these big companies, right? Small companies might think, oh, why do I need this? I'm not that big.
Mhm.
So why is it important for them to kind of start doing these values, attributes, and everything?
Because it's a great question. And the reason I went to the bigger companies is so that people could see just the discipline and how it's done, even with, on that level. It's important to do it, and it's taken very seriously. So if you are starting your marketing campaign, if you're talking to investors, if you're talking to potential partners or customers, if you have somebody else speaking on your behalf, hiring a VA, on and on, your elevator pitch, from the smallest bits of communication, your business cards, to big deals that you're working on, you have to be clear on who you are so that how a company interacts with you, how an employee of any status, part-time, full-time, VA represents you, is how you want it to be done and how you're training them. And it's important that they understand what you're in the business of. It's one thing for me to say, oh, I'm a marketer, help me with my marketing because I need help with that. If I'm going to have a VA help me or a creative person help me. But it's another thing when I say, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's why I do what I do. Here's what I expect of you. And if I don't get the sense that I'm aligned with someone who's helping me as a small business, I can't work with them if they don't get where I'm at, and it's not going to be successful if they can't understand that. And if it doesn't fit into what I'm trying to do and the bigger goal. So, there are a lot of smaller, products or foods out there. And I mean, there's I shouldn't limit it to those, but there's all kinds of businesses, and things are going to come up and you're going to need to make decisions. And sometimes your gut is great, but you need to have something to look back to and say, okay, is this right? Is this where I originally started? And if it's yes or no, then you decide which one is going to change. I've seen I have a great example. Someone, she's a health coach on the services level. She needed to differentiate herself because there's about a dozen health coaches, all over the place on your Facebook feed where she is. There's big names like the Tony Robbins and the Gabrielle Bernsteins, and then there's like smaller ones like herself. And she needed to differentiate herself. And she really lands on her personal one-to-one approach, and that she's a very deep listener without getting into her whole business. She just shot a video of her sitting in an office, a very stuffy, corporate-y environment. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she kind of went a little rogue, but that's an example of I said, did you change your target audience? Was my first question to her. I said, oh, you're targeting corporations now as opposed to individuals. She was like, no. And I said, think about the environment you're in. So if you know your values and what you stand for, and you have something that can help those decisions easier and decisions go easier, and that you can share with a creative team, it saves you a lot of time. It helps them understand what you're doing, or anybody you're going to hire, and short circuits that potential not understanding. And it's something you can talk about. Because it's your own business, it's really hard to think about yourself that way.
Great. Anyone else have questions? You guys are a quiet group today.
In trying to put together my own mission statement, what guidelines do you think I should use as a small business, reaching out to other small businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think in your case, Jonathan, it's not so much, don't think about it because I'm a small business, right? It doesn't, I mean, everybody wants to help people, right? You saw in some of these other statements, that's what you're doing. And one way to think about it for a service business is maybe there's a certain number of people you want to help, or you want to help the people you serve reach a certain goal, but something that you can measure. You want to educate businesses on, best digital practices and how to be more efficient. I can't, I'm not in the
No,
mood
I
to
get
think,
it.
but something like along those lines of that you can measure for the mission.
So measurable's the key.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be written like a goal, like close 2 accounts each month.
No.
But just to distinguish the two. Yeah, but that you can measure it.
Mhm.
Satisfaction and number of accounts, distribution, audience reach.
Right. Something that could be qualified, I think, is what you're saying.
Qualified, yeah, with quantifying too, to some degree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And anyone else before I jump in another question? No. All right. And so I'm thinking of some of these the people on this call, and maybe they have 3 or 5 or maybe 10 clients, but they're consistent. But when you said the attributes, so say you didn't have those, that you could survey those people, right? How would you get to those attributes in another way without surveying?
Well, I think it's without surveying, did you say, or with the survey? Without
Surveying, because maybe you're just starting your brand, or you have those consistent ones. So it varies, right?
Okay. There's two ways to do that. One is just feedback. When you talk to your customer, if you're not ready or you don't feel comfortable giving them a survey, understand why did they hire you? What were they looking for? Somebody who was reliable, somebody who was trustworthy. You returned my emails so quickly. You were so responsive. Those start to build your equity and what you're standing for. You may hear words that you don't want to hear. So that's important. Another way, and this is part of, one of the modules that we go through, is to look at the marketplace. When you go out there and see what your competitors are doing or anyone else in that selection set that your customer might be looking at or might be considering, what do they look like? What do they feel like? How do they sound? Because you may look at, a Starbucks customer may look at Dunkin' Donuts and be like, no way. Okay, why? Why is that? What is that gap there that you can look at your competitor and say, I'm not that, I don't want to be that, I'm never that. And that's a way that you can kind of start to flesh out what you think you're standing for, because you're different than what they're offering. You have different credentials. That gets into your secret sauce and why people, the reason to believe, why people should believe you're the best choice for what you do. Is that?
All right. So everybody can write their vision, their mission, and attributes. And no questions about it? David, you kind of look like still had some questions. You're good? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I have vision, mission, culture about my business, and this is good because I'm going over reading it, talking about just a few of the things and where we lie and how it's relevant into the direction of the business. So when we have tough decisions here in the office, we just pull it out. We go, all right, does it line up with this? Does it line up with this? Does it line up with this? No, we don't do it.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's good that you pull it out. And I would say make sure you pull it. Sometimes it's good to pull it out when you don't have a decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen something that your competitors are doing or another service to say, okay, are we still relevant? Are we still out, on the top of our game and what we want to be delivering, to make sure you don't have to shift in some way or, revisit them. And if it's still there, it's still there. But, the discipline of periodically checking it is important.
Okay.
But that's great.
I guess if nobody else, last chance. Anybody else have questions or thoughts? All right, then. Well, thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much. It was very informative.
Thanks. This is great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Victoria. This was terrific.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Ciao.
All right. Take care.